Apple makes more profit from gaming than Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo combined. $8.5 billion. More profit than every major console manufacturer. And yet, if you're a serious gamer, you wouldn't buy a Mac. You probably wouldn't even consider it. That's not a contradiction. It's the perfect summary of how Apple won gaming and lost it at the exact same time. By the end of this video, you'll understand why Apple's relationship with gaming isn't a failure of technology or money or talent. It's something much deeper and much harder to fix. Because the problem isn't what Apple did, it's what Apple is. Let's start in 1996. Apple is dying. Steve Jobs is gone. And in a desperate attempt to save itself, the company decides to build a gaming console. They called it the Pippin. It was supposed to compete with the PlayStation and N64. It looked like a console, it played games, it connected to the internet. On paper, it was everything a mid-90s gamer wanted, except for one detail. It cost $599. The PlayStation, $299. The N64, $199. Apple's console cost double what its competitors charged. And this wasn't some premium product with exclusive games. This was a scaled-down Macintosh running a handful of mediocre titles, including something called Mr. Potato Head Saves Veggie Valley. The Pippin sold 42,000 units worldwide, out of a projected 500,000. It lasted 1 year before Steve Jobs returned to Apple in 1997 and killed it immediately. He didn't even hesitate. And here's what makes that moment so important. Jobs didn't kill the Pippin because it failed. He killed it because Apple had tried to be something it fundamentally wasn't. But this is where the story gets strange. Because 2 years later, in 1999, Steve Jobs stood on stage at Macworld Expo and announced the future of gaming on the Mac. He was excited, and the game he was unveiling was called Halo. Bungie, the studio behind it, had been making Mac games for years, and Halo was going to be their masterpiece, a revolutionary third-person shooter originally built for the Mac. Jobs gave them prime time at Apple's biggest event of the year. Then Microsoft bought Bungie, and Halo became an Xbox exclusive. Think about that for a second. Apple had the killer app for gaming. They promoted it on their biggest stage, and Microsoft walked in, acquired the studio, and turned Apple's Showcase into the launch title for their own console. Jobs had been publicly humiliated, and according to people inside Apple at the time, he never forgot it, and the company's leadership never fully trusted the gaming industry again. That decision solved one problem. It gave Microsoft the exclusive that saved the Xbox, but it created a bigger one. Because after that moment, Apple's relationship with gaming became complicated. However, here's where things start to shift. In 2007, Apple launched the iPhone, and nobody, not Apple, not developers, not even gamers, understood what they'd just created. Within a few years, the iPhone became the most successful gaming platform in history, not by design, by accident. Apple never intended for the iPhone to be a gaming device. Steve Jobs initially resisted even having a third-party app store. But once it launched, games exploded. Angry Birds, Candy Crush, Clash of Clans. By 2021, Apple was pulling in around $15 billion a year from gaming. More than Nintendo, more than Microsoft. And this is the detail that changes everything. Apple made that money without developing games in-house. They didn't need to build the next Mario or Zelda because the App Store took a standard 30% cut of every transaction, every in-app purchase, every microtransaction, every gotcha mechanic designed to milk players for hundreds of dollars. Apple's gaming revenue didn't come from people buying $60 games. It came from people spending $5 here, $10 there, $50 on a character skin they'd forget about in a month. The mobile gaming industry had figured out how to extract more money from casual players than traditional games ever could from hardcore ones, and Apple just collected the taxes. Which meant Apple won gaming, but only on their terms, and those terms had nothing to do with what gamers actually wanted. Because here's the problem. While Apple was printing money from mobile games, something else was happening. The real gaming industry, AAA titles, esports, streaming, modding communities, was building itself on Windows, on Steam, on platforms where Apple had zero presence. And the reason why comes down to something most people don't even think about: graphics APIs. If you're a game developer, you usually target one of two major standards: DirectX on Windows and Xbox, or Vulkan, which is open source and runs on PC, Linux, and Android. And then there's Metal, Apple's proprietary API. Metal only works on Apple devices. No other platform supports it. Which means that if you have a custom game engine built for DirectX, you can't just port it to Mac. You have to translate your graphics code. That is a massive undertaking. A game built in DirectX 12 requires significant work to run natively on Metal. The graphics pipeline has to be adapted, shaders have to be translated, bugs have to be fixed from scratch. For a studio like Rockstar or Bethesda, that's a multi-million-dollar investment to reach a platform with a global desktop market share of around 10 to 20%. And critically, many of those users are on MacBook Airs, machines not primarily designed for heavy gaming. So they don't do it. And Apple's response? Use Metal. It's better. But better doesn't matter if nobody else uses it. And this is where Apple's philosophy starts to show. Because Apple has always believed in control. When DirectX became the standard for gaming, Apple could have adopted it. When Vulkan launched as the cross-platform alternative, Apple could have supported it. But they didn't, because supporting someone else's standard meant giving up control. So they doubled down on Metal. And they told developers, if you want to reach our users, learn our system. For most apps, that's fine. But for games? Games are built on engines like Unreal and Unity. Those engines support DirectX and Vulkan because that's where the players are. Supporting Metal is extra work for a platform that doesn't move the needle. And even when developers do port games to Mac, there's another problem. The hardware isn't built for it. Apple's obsession with thin, silent, elegant design means their most popular computers, the MacBook Airs, don't have fans. The M1 and M2 chips are incredibly powerful. On paper, they rival dedicated GPUs. But if you run a AAA game on a fanless laptop for 30 minutes, it eventually has to throttle performance to stay cool. Because Apple prioritizes silence over sustained performance. They design computers for people editing video, writing code, and browsing the web, not for people running Elden Ring at max settings for 6 hours straight. The Pro Macs have fans and are actually beasts at gaming, but they cost thousands of dollars. The average Steam user isn't gaming on a $3,000 MacBook Pro. They are on a PC they built for a fraction of the price. Apple prioritizes elegance. Gamers prioritize raw power per dollar. Those two goals rarely meet. That's why the Mac has a reputation for not having games, not because the hardware can't run them, but because the entire system is designed around priorities that don't align with what gaming needs. But here's what's fascinating. In 2023, Apple finally seemed to realize this was a problem. They released the Game Porting Toolkit. It uses translation layers, similar to Wine on Linux, to translate DirectX instructions to Metal in real time. And the community went wild. People started using it to run Cyberpunk 2077, Elden Ring, even Diablo 4 on their Macs. For the first time in years, Macs were running modern Windows games at playable frame rates. Except there was a catch. Apple licensed the toolkit only for evaluation purposes. It was a message to developers. It's only meant to show what's possible, not to actually ship products. They proved that modern games can run on Mac hardware, but they still require developers to do the heavy lifting of porting the final product to Apple's ecosystem to get the best experience and distribution. And that's when the truth becomes unavoidable. Apple doesn't want to just run Windows games. They want developers to build Apple games, but they haven't given developers a financial reason to do so. Now let's talk about money, because remember, Apple makes massive profits from gaming. But here's the thing, that money doesn't come from the kind of games that matter to the gaming industry. It comes from mobile games with gotcha mechanics and microtransactions. And in 2020, Epic Games decided to challenge that model. Epic, the company behind Fortnite and Unreal Engine, updated Fortnite to let players buy in-game currency directly, bypassing Apple's 30% cut. Apple immediately banned Fortnite from the App Store. Epic sued, and the lawsuit exposed just how much Apple was making from gaming and how little they cared about the developers creating it. Court documents revealed that 70% of App Store revenue came from gaming, and that Apple viewed game developers not as partners, but as a revenue source. The judge ruled mostly in Apple's favor regarding the monopoly claims, but the message to the core industry was clear. Apple is a walled garden. So let's go back to the beginning. Why doesn't Apple have games? It's not because the technology isn't there. The M3 Max chip is faster than most gaming laptops. It's not because developers don't want to make games for Mac. Some have tried and given up. It's not even because Apple doesn't make money from gaming. They make more than anyone. It's because Apple, at its core, doesn't care about gaming the way gamers need them to. They care about mobile microtransactions because it's passive income. They care about showing off graphics performance for 2 minutes at a keynote, but they don't care about building a platform where AAA developers want to build, where modding communities can thrive, where hardware is designed for 6-hour gaming sessions instead of 4-hour battery life. And the reason comes down to culture. Steve Jobs wanted computers to be appliances, beautiful, intuitive tools that just work. Gamers want computers to be workshops, machines they can tweak, mod, upgrade, and push to the limit. You can't be both. Apple's mobile gaming empire exists because they stopped trying to build for gamers. They didn't design the iPhone for games, they designed it for everything, and casual players found it on their own. But the moment Apple tries to compete for hardcore gamers, the Pippin fails. The Mac loses developers. The game porting toolkit gets released with a license so restrictive it's useless for actual products. Because Apple keeps trying to bring gaming into their world instead of meeting gaming where it is. Meanwhile, Microsoft bought Activision Blizzard for nearly $69 billion. Sony's PlayStation 5 is printing money. Steam keeps breaking concurrent user records, and Apple is still making billions from microtransactions. But the real reason Apple lost gaming? They never wanted it badly enough to compromise what they are. And in an industry built on compromises between performance and price, between openness and optimization, between developers and platform holders, that's the one thing you can't afford to be rigid about. Apple didn't lose gaming by accident. They lost it by choice. They just never admitted, maybe not even to themselves. And now, 30 years after the Pippin, nothing has really changed. Apple still makes more money from gaming than anyone, and gamers still won't buy a Mac. Because Apple won the battle for mobile, but they lost the war for what gaming actually is. And the saddest part? They still don't seem to realize it matters.